Welcome to another edition of Advocate Drum's Interviews and Insights. My name is Tom Kerman, and I serve as the chair for Advocate Drum. It is truly my pleasure today to introduce Major General Milford H. Beagle. General Beagle is a true friend and a great leader, and he's done such a great job under his leadership to integrate Fort Drum into the community. Biggs, it's great to see you, and thank you for joining us. Major General Beagle serves as the Commanding General of the 10th Mountain Division of Fort Drum. He also served as the Deputy Commanding General back in 2017 and 18. Between the two Fort Drum assignments, he was the 51st Commanding General of the United States Training Center at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. While I don't have time to highlight all of his accomplishments, I would note that Major General Beagle is the great-grandson of a World War I veteran, Walter Beagle, and is the second African-American to command the 10th Mountain Division since Lloyd Austin back in 2003 to 2005. I truly see a great future for Major General Beagle. Please join me in welcoming Major General Beagle today. I also welcome back Alex Hazard to the interviewers chair today. I suspect that most of us know Alex, but if you don't, Alex is the lifestyle host on the North Country television affiliate ABC 50. I do hope that all of you enjoyed this session. I'm really looking forward to it. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't thank National Grid, who is our corporate sponsor for Interviews and Insights. We couldn't do this without their support. Thank you so much. As I turn this over to Alex, I want to thank him for his ongoing support of Advocate Drum and for the entire Fort Drum community. Enjoy the show.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks again to National Grid. And General Beagle, it's great to see you again. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your time, for sitting down with us today.
No, Alex, this is great. And I mean, this is time well spent and time that I enjoy spending, especially with you, because I get to see you on a pretty, regular basis. So it's pretty awesome to be talking to somebody that you know. And I definitely appreciate your time as well.
Well, the feeling's mutual. And, we all understand the importance of knowing and sharing our personal stories, our history. And I recently learned that your great-grandfather is a World War I veteran. So as we begin today's interview, could you take a few moments to just share your story and the story of your grandfather with us?
Yeah, so I love sharing that story, but just to give you a little bit of context around it, because again, you can talk to several people and they may have a relative that served at various periods throughout our history, World War I, World War II. But it was while I was at Fort Jackson, when I went to command there, and I didn't find out until I was there. Knew my grandfather had served, knew it was World War I, but as relatives pieced together where I was going, what I was doing, they said your great grandfather fought in World War I. So I pulled up records, had my historians look into it. And I said, the key thing I wanted to know is, great grandpa served and it was honorably, right? That's all I really wanted to find out. And so they kept peeling it back and found out that he enlisted at Fort Jackson. And that was at a time when, Army was segregated. He couldn't go into certain branches. I mean, the branch that I grew up in the infantry, you weren't allowed to serve in infantry, if you were of color. You weren't allowed to be an officer if you were of color. But that was the time that he joined. And so a lot of what he did there was labor. He did deploy, to France. And me coming in as a great grandson 100 plus years later to command the installation was something that, locally everybody pieced together. And it was very powerful, not only for the installation, but the community. And a lot of people would say to me is like, pretty ironic, that's all happening. And I'll be very quick to correct him and say, it's not really irony, is progress, right? And it takes, in some cases, 100 years to see that progress, but it is progress as we strive to do multiple things in our Army with regard to diversity, equity, inclusion. And that was one case of it. And the good thing about my great-grandpa, I was very fortunate to, he didn't pass away until I was 15 years old. And so I knew him. He didn't really share a lot of the war stories, which most soldiers, for whatever reason, we tend not to do, but I did know him, spent plenty of time with him. And so that was pretty surreal for me to piece all that together, walking on installation, Camp Jackson back then, similar to our Camp Drum back in the day. It was just all, just phenomenal.
Well, you mentioned there spending some time at Fort Jackson, and in your last assignment there, your role was focused on training the Army's recruits. Today, you are leading one of the most deployed divisions. Can you share how you ensure the 10th Mountain is trained to deploy at a moment's notice?
Yeah. So the key thing, Alice, is making sure we're ready. I mean, the training we're going to do, we have, training packages, training opportunities, just like our brigade down at JRTC, Joint Readiness Training Center right now. But it's really making sure everybody's ready first. I mean, that is a priority, and that is one of my top priorities is readiness. And when I talk readiness, and when we say making sure soldiers are ready, that means, their health, their fitness, their personal affairs. If the soldier is ready in that sense, now we can train. And a lot of times we're training for the unknown. We educate for uncertainty. We train for certainty. But as we deploy and be in the most deployed division, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. So it's very easy to do the training piece. It's very hard to do the readiness piece, because if you think about those areas I covered, you're talking health, you're talking fitness, you're talking personal affairs. That's truly the day-to-day fight. So my focus is there. And once that's complete and the soldier, the family, they're all taken care of, then they can train, and they can train to whatever comes their way, which again, in our history, our deployment, track record, we've pretty much done it all. And that is a mission that continues to go a focus every single day.
Has the division training focus changed in terms of preparing for the next war or deployment?
It has in a sense, but what I want everybody to understand is we're in and it's not a dilemma, but we're in a different spot than every other division in our Army. And what do I mean by that? We're the only division still tethered to the CENTCOM area of operation. So forces in Iraq, granted, we're out of Afghanistan, but we still have forces in that entire area for Central Command, and we're tied to that. So not only do we have to maintain our readiness and training for that area of operation, is also focused on large-scale operations, LISCO, the new fight that we're looking at, and then multi-domain operations. So now we've got two directions that we have to face with regard to our training and our focus, and we're able to do that. But I think that's part of the uniqueness of our division is we can do more than one thing at a time, and very agile and going back and forth between the two of them. But training has changed in the sense of, large scale combat operations. That's more of the actual division fighting. And we'll do that later this summer, at least get practice at it, all virtual in our warfighter. That's why we do the warfighter exercise, but that'll be focused on the new fight, and all the units will be connected to that. But, in terms of real war missions right now, then everything's linked to preparing forces as they go to not only the Central Command area of responsibility. There's three other areas of responsibility that we have soldiers in. We have soldiers in the Southern Hemisphere in South America, right now. We have soldiers in Africa, soldiers in Europe. And so we have to do a bit of it all, because we are the 10th Mountain Division, and everybody, expects us to be ready. They will never ask the question.
Well, to that point, full-scale combat operations against a near-peer competitor is radically different from counterinsurgency operations. So where will the 10th Mountain Division fit into this future of combat operations?
One is to be able to project power and move rapidly. And then that's why we're here. That's why we exist. And being the 10th Mountain and going back to our history, we're typically, who the Army is going to come to first. And I love the saying when they say, when our nation calls, they call the Army. When our Army calls, they call 10th Mountain, because we're light and we're lethal and we can move very quick. So in a large scale combat operation, to buy yourself that time to get all the other forces, I mean, the big machine of the Army moving, ships flowing, planes flying, you need forces on the ground pretty quick. And it's going to come from within the corps that we're in, 18th Airborne Corps, 82nd, 101st, 10th Mountain. But even as agile and great as they are, 82nd and 101st, we're probably going to get there quicker and faster. And being able to get there, at that scale is again what we're preparing to do and what we've always been prepared to do. But you're right, radically different in terms of the sheer scale of large scale combat operations. You think back to World War I, World War II. So when people are talking about it, they're talking the division is fighting, not necessarily brigades, and you got multiple divisions that are fighting. So being one of the first potentially in and being able to move around a battlefield at that scale is what, our part of that would be.
Well, a great example of 10th Mountain readiness is reflected in the 23rd Military Police Company's recent deployment to Afghanistan on short notice to a rather historic mission. If folks aren't familiar, can you share with everybody exactly what happened here and let us know how the soldiers are doing, and of course what the division is doing to help them through since they've returned.
Yeah, and so the context behind that one for everybody is understanding when the soldiers of the 23rd MP Company woke up, that day, some were out in the field already training. They weren't expecting to be anywhere else than Fort Drum in the North Country, for the next week and the next month and so on after that. But we have this approach where certain units that are not tagged to go anywhere or at least on standby, and so you have a general heads up that, okay, you're on standby to be ready. They weren't even in that category, completely, off the radar. But based on mission requirements, what do you need? We need an MP company. You need something different across the board in terms of the Army's perspective and what's needed. Then it was that MP company, and they had 96 hours to get themselves ready and be ready to go, and they did. They were the first out of 3 MP companies that were required from other divisions. Ours was the first to go and the first to get on the ground. And they executed the mission phenomenally, linking in with 82nd. We had elements of our 3rd Brigade at Fort Polk that were already there. They had to go from Kuwait into Kabul into Afghanistan, and on the way back. So in a sense of both units, the soldiers that went back to Fort Polk, the 23rd MPs that came back here, what we worried about and feared the most was just their mental health, their mental stability coming back, because they saw a lot of things that many of us that have deployed many times before really hadn't seen it. And a lot of that played out, on the news, as you saw and many others saw. So the reverse process of allowing them to decompress, see behavioral health, get their arms around what they saw in theater occurred while they were there at a very intense level. And as they return, that continued. And then it continues to this day, because, things won't manifest themselves right away. For some, it would. For the most part, no major issues manifested, but it's over time. It could be anything, a myriad of things, over 6 months that just cause, that those emotions or whatever the case may be to manifest themselves. And that's what we're watching out for. And that's how we, closely monitor them, the soldiers at Fort Polk, and for that matter, soldiers that deploy anywhere. It's still part of what we go through as they come back, whether it's intense combat or not. But this one is more of a focus because it was pretty intense and very different, radically different than what most would see in a deployment to Iraq or Afghanistan.
Shifting gears here a little bit, fitness is critical to building a strong, agile, and effective Army. I know that you use personal fitness challenges to connect with soldiers. I see your social media postings, doing PT with soldiers in the morning, motivating your team. Physical fitness is something that's easy to measure, but we know now the importance of mental fitness is just as important, if not more important than physical. So how do commanders measure a soldier's mental fitness?
Yeah, so the short answer, Alex, is I would say, we can't measure it. The physical piece, yes, we can measure. We have the tests, we have, competitions. You can do a lot of things to measure the physical fitness, but when it comes to the mental, we have to assess. And that's where, you use every tool that you have at your disposal. And we have a lot of tools to really assess someone's mental health. It starts with the leader. I mean, that's simply, a counseling to understand that person, how they grew up, their background, those type of things, just to get an assessment, because somebody's background can tell you a whole lot potentially about just where they may be, mentally. You pull that string a little bit more, then you talk about the assessment tools that we have. We have tools that will help us, see a holistic picture. We call it the Commander's Risk Reduction Tool, where I can take, certain instances, certain things that I hear and look at it holistically and go, individually, it may not be a problem, but holistically, altogether, that again is another indicator. So we constantly have to assess where someone's mental health is, and we can use other tools that we have through our chaplains. We have embedded behavioral health. So at any point in time, another point where if you go see embedded behavioral health, there's an assessment right there. But we have to always constantly add those things up, together to paint that whole picture. So it's never a matter of, can we measure it? Can we test it? It's the assessments we're getting. Can we put those together and then use it for, something to help that soldier in case, the assessment holistically is not good, then what resource do we connect, that individual to? So it's really that constant focus on assessing, that mental health.
In September 2021, we tragically suffered 3 soldier suicides within 48 hours at Fort Drum. The immediate response is to want to determine the underlying challenges that contributed to the decision to harm themselves, to know what was missed. Finding those answers, obviously not easy. Can you share how the division dealt with this tragedy and what resources are available to soldiers, leaders, and family members who are or know someone that might need help?
Yeah, so the way we dealt with it, and once, when you have a tragic event like that happen, then everything after the tragic event is pretty much, in a framework where you're focused more so on, the family, and then you're focusing on, the investigate and inquire to really figure out what happened, what did we miss. So those are the two priorities, and all three of those soldiers, their families, at least two of them came here for our memorials for both of those soldiers. One family was overseas, so couldn't make it, but all the focus is right there. And simultaneous with that, as I mentioned, the investigate, inquire phase of everything to see what did we really miss. In some cases, you may find, we didn't miss a lot. A lot of the pieces were there, but the challenge is always putting those pieces together real time. And that's where the third focus is. After you take care of those two priorities, after a tragic event with those three suicides, then we have to zoom out. And what I mean by zoom out is looking at, multiple programs, multiple tools, and then figuring out, like, what did we really miss? And if all those things that we have at our disposal are not in sync, then even if we catch it, we may be off because, again, something is not connected to the other thing within, our entire environment. So behavioral health linked to leaders linked through chaplains, all of our assessments, because when you're dealing with, challenges and struggles, everything for that individual is in sync, and you have a very short amount of time. So it boiled down to us for those three is that short amount of time between decision and action. Again, that is where we really, need to figure out how do we impact that. And you have to really go far left, because again, once the decision is made, it's out of sight, out of location of anybody that can help, then you're going to get to a bad outcome. And so looking through all of those things allowed us to handle it, really see, we peeled it back. And I don't, mind sharing the fact that of all three, relationships were like the common thread, between all three. Just happenstance, I think that all three were within a 48-hour time frame, but it was relationships. And that was an area where, again, hard to prevent that, hard to do anything about that. But making sure they know, one, they can, it's okay to hurt out loud at some point when the event comes or happens, but that goes to our point of building cohesive teams, being better at building trust. But all those things are intangibles, not anything that we can do as a program, that we have to do. So even when the worst possible thing could happen, I can reach out to Alex and go, hey, this is what's going on, and kind of go from there, and everybody being alert to that. But that was the general approach and kind of what we see when we see something as tragic as the suicides that we had back in September.
Well, we'll be thinking of them and all of their families. I need to shift gears again here, though, to building trusted Army professionals and how key that is to the 10th Mountain Division's effectiveness and success. Can you share with us your thoughts on leader development and what it looks like at the 10th Mountain Division and how you personally support it?
Leader development is I have four priorities. Leader development is in those four because it's key to everything. You have to, and I tell like newcomers today, we have our newcomers every Thursday. Today was about over 150 new to the North Country, new to the 10th Mountain Division. And I tell them, everybody in the room from private up to captain was, I think, the highest in the room today. You're all leaders, and we have to develop you appropriately. And the thing that, we all want all of our soldiers to do is to stay on the path that they're on. Everybody that comes here, they're winning. As I tell them, you're already on a winning trajectory. We have to keep you there. We have to make you successful. And part of that is to leader develop. So part of my leader development approach is not just the soldiers, it's our civilians. It's one collective team, but the approach in some cases has to be a little bit different. And in some cases, it's exactly the same. It's all about, understanding people, understanding yourself, and then how do you help others, grow and develop and self-develop. And with our programs here, we have multiple programs, anywhere from reading to, just sitting down with my leaders point to point, doing coaching, not necessarily counseling, but coaching and mentoring is all part of the leader development, and just kind of cascading down from that. So one, setting the model. We do things to the extent of we train our leaders on how our division fights. all the way down to the simple one that we did most recent was, looking at a business book called Broken Windows, Broken Business. But how does that relate to us? There's broken windows that we may miss. And what that means is things that you just may walk by every single day. You don't pay any attention to it. It's a broken window. So what do you demonstrate to the rest of the organization? Nobody cares and nobody's in charge. That's leader development. So we have to teach our leaders to never walk by a broken window. So it really covers a gamut. Leader development is one thing I'm excited about because it's so much you have to give back to those that, are now walking a mile in the shoes that you've already walked. And that's where it really gets good in terms of, what I do, with my job is, I've got more career behind me than I do ahead of me. And what am I going to do with it? You've got to impart that knowledge on the team that's coming up behind you, because somebody's going to be in the seat years from now. And my goal is, they've been developed properly to do what I'm doing at this point.
Well, earlier this month, New York State joined a handful of states requiring healthcare workers to get a COVID-19 booster. We know that soldiers are required to be vaccinated. Are boosters also required, and what are the repercussions for those who refuse to do it?
Yeah, so right now, boosters are not part of the requirement. In certain language, you will see fully vaccinated as 2 doses of the vaccine, or 1 if it's J&J, and then the booster. But we're not at that point yet with the Department of Defense to say that is a complete package. So booster is still a bit of the outlier, but it's still the focus to get soldiers boosted. I just went to one of our booster clinics today, and we had spouses, we had soldiers, we had civilians, employees. They were all there. So that is going very well. The repercussions with regard to those that don't get it, and I'll be, again, transparent with you, for the division, I mean, all 18,000 plus, I mean, we're at like 98%, vaccination rate, two doses across the board, which is very, very high. Right. In terms of refusals, again, given the DoD mandate, can't give raw numbers, but I'll give you percentages. 0.7 is our refusal numbers. So what do you do with those? Those that flat just refuse. You have a couple of buckets, those that can refuse, but they're not really refusing. They want a religious exception, and all of those are submitted up to the Department of the Army, and medical exceptions or exemptions are all submitted up. And it depends on what the Army deems is appropriate, whether it's approved or disapproved. Then it puts them in that category, or to make a decision, are you going to refuse now because your exemption was disapproved? If it's approved, okay. If it's disapproved, now you have another decision. And if that decision is you're just not going to take it, you'll go through a series of counseling, re-education in terms of the vaccine, the pros and cons, the science behind it, everything else. And you're given multiple opportunities through counseling to go, I'm just going to flat refuse. Once you're at that point, then you're flagged. So for us, what a flag means is now favorable actions, can't happen for you in terms of, in some cases, your leave, in some cases, awards or other things, you're flagged. And that's going to limit your opportunities in the military at that point. On top of that, there's a general order letter reprimand that comes signed by me. I have to sign every single one, go through every one. That now goes in your record, another flag on your record, because even if you stay, it's going to limit your potential to continue on in the military. The overall phase 2 of things is once everything is kind of rectified and consolidated with regard to, with exemptions, medical and religious, the determination of those that need to be separated because they're going to refuse and I'm never going to do the vaccine. That is yet to be determined with regard to Department of Defense, the Army, what we're going to do. One thing that has been determined is the type of separation, how it's going to be categorized. So honorable, that's already been provided, to all services, but now it's a matter of when. And I think we're still working through, if you use our example, 0.7%, continue to drive that number down because still that's, quite a huge amount of people, even in the large scheme of things, that you really don't want to see exit. So the time I think is being taken now from the Army is like, let's keep working that number down and get more folks on board before we really have to make the hard call. Air Force, Marines have already done it and started some of their separations. The Army has not at this point.
Well, with those percentages, I think we'll know the answer here, but I'm going to go ahead and ask anyway. These vaccine and booster requirements are impacting many businesses' abilities to hire and retain employees. Is the Army and 10th Mountain Division having any retention issues associated with the vaccine requirements?
Well, some, and I mean, I wouldn't say retention issues with regard to the soldiers. Our retention is actually probably better than it's been in the last 2 years, ironically. But with our civilian workforce and some of the contracted workforce we've seen the impact there. And in some cases, the civilians have a much easier route in terms of, resign, not gonna work, or decide to work elsewhere. But it's been an impact. I would say low at this point, if I use the low, moderate, high. So we're kind of at that low point, which is very good. So very comparable to just refusals on our civilian side is about the same, if not lower, on our civilian side. But COVID just in general has impacted that, which made it good for me to see, a lot of our civilians today, in line to get the booster, and because a lot of our team here, they really get it. They understand the impact that they make if we don't have them in the workforce.
For the past number of months, we've seen nearly all of our soldiers home. How are the soldiers and families doing securing appropriate housing and other services needed within the community here?
Yeah, we're doing very well with housing. I mean, right now on the installation, we're at like 97%, capacity with the housing that we have. And even with all the housing that we do have, that's only going to accommodate roughly, 40, a little bit over 40% of all the soldiers that we have. So the rest of that lives out in our great community. And even there, not a lot of challenges or issues with finding housing, out in the local community area. The oddest question I had today from a soldier newcomer was, "Sir, how far away can we stay from the installation?" I said, "Well, we don't want you staying in North Carolina. That's not going to be reality. Probably not too smart to stay in Syracuse if you don't know the area, if you're going to make that drive every day." But it's not an issue. That question wasn't asked because there's an issue in our Tri-County area. And so all those things are going very well. The services provided by the community, I mean, they continue to be phenomenal. I mean, our healthcare network, our education network, just that close connection allows us to leverage the resources, that we need.
Well, I was really surprised to read that junior enlisted families at some Army posts, typically in metropolitan high-cost areas, are experiencing food insecurity. Is this an issue for soldiers here at Fort Drum?
It's an issue across the Army. I think all services. If you look at some of the disparity across, ranks, and a lot of our pay is not based on your rank, it's based on your responsibility, what you do, generally like it would be anywhere else. But until things are increased, there's a National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, where, a pay raise, 2.7% pay raise, which is good. But all those things lag behind just, society in general. But then that helps. Our BAH rates, or, rent rates that, we receive if you're living off the installation, the basic allowance for housing, those have been changed. So now a lot of our officers, depending on your rank, lose portions of their BAH to increase those for the enlisted soldiers. So that was part of the Secretary of Defense initiative for financial security. So you reduce that financial strain across the board on soldiers, but there's still those that, again, find it very hard, to make ends meet at lower ranks, but for a lot of different reasons. Some of our young soldiers, based on rank, may not be young because they're coming into the Army with an established family already, with kids, and now look at your reduction, or, I wouldn't say a reduction in some cases, maybe an increase in pay, but with everything that's there to support you, is still not enough, because look at the size of the family that you have and look at what you're receiving financially. But that has been something in policy directed by Secretary of Defense to help with financial insecurities. But even in that area, there are things in the community that I know help, things that we do internal to help soldiers that may be struggling. I mean, a simple example would be Thanksgiving. I mean, in our housing area, our housing director there, turkey goes out to every, lower enlisted, senior enlisted soldier that lives in housing, as examples. So all those things are there. Our AER loans, or Army Emergency Relief, loans, grants, those things are there because we generally know you're going to have a portion of our formation that is going to struggle financially, just based on how things are with regard to pay scales and everything else.
Let's talk now about spousal employment. We made significant progress with New York State licensing reciprocity for professionals. With the growth of remote employment due to COVID, do you see the challenges of spousal employment decreasing, and what areas remain challenging for our family spouses and military spouses to secure meaningful employment?
Yeah, when it comes to spouse employment, Alex. I mean, I hope we're seeing a decrease, or we will see a decrease. But now, just given everything that's going on in job markets and the Great Resignation, as they call it, not a lot of folks desiring to go back to work or not ready to go back to work. Currently, it's very hard to tell. But given everything that has been done in the state of New York to make things easier for the spouses, the playing field is level. I think in that perspective, the only challenge we're going to have is with regard to two things: predictability and flexibility. So what I mean by those two things is, the life of a military spouse is not, is not predictable in that sense. The one consistency is inconsistency. And so the thing that they need, which is really hard to help in any kind of policy or law, is flexibility, is really to give them flexibility, because that is the thing that they will need the most. But that'll be based on individual employers understanding what their spouse does. I mean, use an example of somebody that spouse is deployed, and will be gone for 30 days. So now if I'm employed somewhere else, I need that flexibility, because I may have kids, childcare may have issues there. So that's the only area I think that there's issues, but there's no, unique fix right now, no silver bullet for it. But with regard to programs, I was down at Syracuse before the holidays, and great programs there. So all the resources and programs that they have to help veterans, military families, and spouses, the playing field is truly level. But what's yet to be seen is, how are we leveraging that with our spouses? Because a great deal of work been done, as you mentioned, to break down barriers and red tape, for our spouses.
Well, as you look at the community, what do you see as needing improvement to support families, enhance soldier training, and to improve deploying unit formations effectively from Fort Drum?
Yeah, it's always hard to say, where do you improve when you're in the North Country? If you asked me and I was at pick a fort, I'd probably give you a laundry list of things, but that's always very hard. I swear, it's very hard to answer in the North Country, because everybody here, I mean, just literally bends over backwards. And when I talk about the resources, I mean, where we're lacking in something, is coming from the community, and it's always there. Not late to need it, it's there when we need it. And I can go, across the board with education, with healthcare, with other things. I mean, employment, you name it, it's always there. The thing that I'm doing now, and the team here we're focused on, is looking forward. So for right now, we're good, and I think that's great. But what about forward? When we talk about large scale combat operations, what does Fort Drum look like? How do we look like as a team in 2028? The Army has a perspective of looking at the Army in 2028 and 2035. Well, we have to do that collectively here at Fort Drum, because we can project power. We've had a lot of improvements with our rail lines and our airfield and those type things, to where we can do that great right now. But what about 2028? What about 2035, when the Army needs us to look a little bit different? The whole Army will be shaped a little bit different in order to match the missions. So the effort, and I call it our concept 2028, is not developed because it's something we can't develop in a vacuum, is to bring in everybody key in our community to the table with us, so we can develop that together, because we've always been closely linked and tied. And that's really going to be the proof in the pudding of, what do we need down the road? For right now, we're great, we're good. But what are we going to need down the road is really going to be phenomenal and fascinating. And it's something that I'm excited about, to see how we do pull together to figure out what's next. And that will set us, again, apart from everybody else, I think, within our Army, because that's what set us apart to this day. And looking at how Fort Drum was established, how it's connected to the community, and what we're able to do.
Well, developing those relationships and partnering with the local community helps both to understand the needs and capabilities they have to offer. So to provide a venue to tell the division's story, showcase warriors, and strengthen the community partnership, you have implemented the Mountain Outreach Program, also known as the SNAP Link program. For folks that might not be familiar, can you explain to us what this is and how the program works?
Yeah, so in the Army, a snap link, I mean, it's kind of what, like it sounds. I mean, if anybody's been rock climbing or rappelling or anything else, I mean, you're linked together. We call it linked at the hip, and it's consistent, and it's something that you have to build over time. Not only the continuity, the consistency, but the trust, and that's always key for us to build, given our area, all the tri-counties, all the partners that we have. So SnapLink links our major commands on the installation, our brigades, to the different counties, and within that, you further engage down to even the smallest village to where you have that constant connection and relationship. You use an example of our CAB. Well, they fly, up in the St. Lawrence area and a little bit further. So again, it's important for that commander to be linked into that entire, community. So again, before things come up, we can talk about it. We can explain what's happening, what's going on. If there's things that are needed from us, then again, that same commander, he can leverage all the leaders in his formation to go out, support community events, to go explain certain things across, the entire county if need be. But it's that consistency of that relationship that makes SnapLink important to us. And oh, by the way, bad things are going to happen. So when something bad happens, again, you've got that instant relationship already established to where contact to find out, to work through, issues or problems. They know right, where to go and who to go to. And it's something that's been sustained over time. And that is key. That was something that existed when I left here last time, went away a little bit, but bringing it back stronger and better so that we have irreversible momentum with our relationships across, all of our counties and beyond if need be.
Well, as you mentioned, this is your second assignment at Fort Drum, which gives you a unique perspective on the division and what a great community relationship you have already. So what advice do you have for our community members on how we can enhance the Army's mission, as well as the soldier and family's experience and what they can have here?
Yeah, I think this forum does it, because part of it is, we always have a bias to action and not a bias to understanding. But this Advocate Drum is one of those forums. And I was, knew about Advocate Drum the last time. It was great because it was all about understanding. Just understand, our partners, the team, what you do, and what you need. And that's where I really applaud, Advocate Drum in and of itself, is that bias to understand first before we do anything. And that, pays dividend when not only are we telling our story, but we have others in the community that can tell our story, and they can see it from a perspective of empathy of, here's why this needs to be a certain way. And I think that's why so many things have worked out so well between us and the North Country and our community, is because of that understanding. So there's not ever, to me, one thing that I can, point my finger at and say, because it's the bigger thing. It's exactly what we're doing right now. It's that bias to understand, and understand each other very well, so that we're connected and we remain connected.
Well, thank you for connecting with us today, General Beagle. I really appreciate you taking the time. Another thank you to our sponsor, National Grid, and to Advocate Drum, but mostly to you for taking the time and breaking all of this down for us.
Yeah, no, Alex, I hope it helps, but it's always good, like I said, to see you, and for the rest of the team out there. I want to wish everybody a happy new year, and it's just great to be in the North Country. It is great to be in this division, and look forward to seeing, many of you, which I know I will at some point in time. But thanks again.
Well, I know last time I saw you were on stage playing drums, so maybe we can make that happen next time. I personally enjoyed that.
It was great for me. I mean, being at Indian River, that was awesome. So I just got to get to, once the word spread, I'm pretty sure I'll be in other places too, but it's all good. It is phenomenal.
We'll see you Saturday night then.
All right. Thanks,
Bye,
Alex.
General Beagle.